welcome back to Recovery Demystified. My name's Early. I'm so happy to have y'all here today. Today, I'm going to share with you a few more books and podcasts that I found interesting recently. As y'all know, I tried everything in recovery and nothing worked. I famously say that I was quitting drinking and drugs for 13 years, and I hope that no one ever has to do that, which is why I want to share all of this information that I've gotten over the past few years, so y'all can just have it at your fingertips and you don't have to go out there searching for what's good amidst whatever sort of difficult experience you're having in your brain, because it's really hard to find good information sometimes when we're just focusing on survival. And this podcast is for anyone who is it's for anyone, right? Who's questioning their relationship to substances, but mostly the people I want to reach are people who are like, oh my God, I've tried everything. I tried AA and I've tried therapy and I've tried blah, blah, blah. And this, that, and the other thing, and nothing seems to help me. And that was my case for sure. And I think everyone recovers in their own way, and certain things help certain people. But I think if you're one of those people, it's like, I am so exhausted. I've tried everything. I think what we need to do, what I did and what I invite people to try to do is intentionally rewire your brain based on the concept of neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity basically means that our brains are constantly changing all of the time, where certain neural connections are growing, certain ones are fading away. And if we put forth intention towards the ones that we want to allow to fade away and the ones that we want to grow, then we can leverage that concept of neuroplasticity to create the brain that we would like for ourselves. And it's a slow path. You just gotta, keep your head down, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and just trust the process. But while we're intentionally rewiring our brains to not have an addiction, basically we have to unbrainwash ourselves. So we've spent our whole lives living in alcohol-soaked culture, living in a culture that doesn't teach us how to regulate our emotions in a healthy way. It doesn't teach us how to have good, healthy relationships. It doesn't teach us how to communicate. Our culture basically is just you need alcohol to have fun. You need alcohol to relieve your stress. You need alcohol, blah, 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 right? And it teaches us that some emotions are bad and we shouldn't have them and we should feel terrible about having them and they should be just removed from us at all costs, right? So we have to unlearn all of that stuff, which is harmful bullshit that got us in this hole in the first place. And as we unlearn that, we need to intentionally replace it with more truthful information. And how I did that was just by completely immersing and soaking myself in books and podcasts, along with going to a professional therapist. And in addition to that, changing my self-hatred to self-love, and then doing all of the really basic things that humans need to care for themselves as the foundation of it all. So there's sleeping well, drinking water, eating food, getting rest, getting movement, all of that stuff is non-negotiable. And as my basic human needs started to be met, and I believed that change was possible, and I believed that I deserved change within that framework, I was able to deconstruct the false bullshit that the alcohol industrial complex tells us that we need to drink all the time for every freaking reason, and deconstruct the ideas that our emotions are bad, and deconstruct all of the toxic bullshit that late stage capitalism forces upon us in this kind of weird, chaotic, dystopian world, and then replace that with the information that I got, science-based information from books and podcasts. And I invite y'all to try that too, especially if you're oh, nothing works for me, because you can rewire your own brain. That is within your control. Anyway, here's a few books that I read this month that I'm excited to share with y'all. The first one that I read is called I'm Black and I'm Sober. A minister's daughter tells her story about fighting the disease of alcoholism and winning by Chaney Allen. This one is super old. Let me flip to 1978. So it's cool because you can see that throughout time, all different kinds of people through all different walks of life in all different decades of existence kind of have held this same difficult issue with addiction. And her story it's really intense. So she's born in the Great Depression and basically endured literal starvation as a child. And then she found alcohol later in life, and it was that hallelujah, aha, where has this been? This warm blanket type of feeling. And she lives in a, gosh, what do you call it? I want to say trap house, but that's not right. Like, where do they serve alcohol during Prohibition? Speakeasy. She lives in like kind of a speakeasy house with her brother selling alcohol, and she has like a number of abusive relationships that she's in, and it just like spirals super far out of control. And it's really well written. Like, she's just an absolute natural storyteller. So it's like pretty engaging, page turner type of book. She actually originally self-published it and called it I'm Black and I'm Drunk. But then she wanted to reach more people with her story, so she got a publisher, and they're like, hey, how about we switch it to I'm Black and I'm Sober? But this book, it was the first book that I was reading that I was like so viscerally triggered in my body that I wasn't sure if I could finish it. And it made me realize that like these memoir style books, they're really, really good at like letting you know you're not alone. You're not the only one that has been through this, and that no matter how bad it gets, it's always possible to bring yourself out of it. But sometimes reading these stories, like, it can bring up so much unprocessed emotions from our past. And I just like would like to encourage people that when you're reading this type of book, the addiction memoir, to have a good support system on hand, because, you know, I'm like years and years into therapy, and at this point, like, I understand myself quite well. I obviously, like, I'm not fucking healed or whatever, but I have a lot of resources at my disposal. Basically, like, I'm pretty proud of the fact that I can tolerate emotions quite well in like a healthy manner at this point, and my emotional literacy is really good. But I had to set this book down because the extent that her drinking went to, it sort of mirrored a lot of what I went through in my darkest points, which is just absolute loss of functioning, disconnection from reality, peeing in a bush type shit, waking up covered in puke. That really just, you know, it's not cute. It's not a good look. But she really, really, really brought her body and her mind like to the absolute brink, and she comes back from it, and it's a great story. She tells it so well. It's a great read. She does get sober through the 12 steps, which y'all know I have my things to say, but my official line on that is like, whatever works. If it works for you, get after it. And if it doesn't work for you, try something else. But that was her journey, and she made it work for her. And it's interesting, like, her experience of race within it all. She gets into that pretty deeply. There's like, in early AA, there is a pretty bad history of racism. Like, they wouldn't allow black folks, or even, I mean, they also wouldn't allow women at the meetings in the first place. So she kind of had to fight for her place in that space of recovery. But it worked for her, and she empowered herself through being able to like find that space and that program. And her story is just really intense, but it's a great book. So I recommend I'm Black and I'm Sober by Chaney Allen. And then the next one I read this month was called Pillhead, The Secret Life of a Painkiller Addict by Joshua Lyon. And I don't remember why I bought this one. I think it was just like, I buy so many books on addiction that Thrift Books was like, hey, maybe you'll like this one. And I was like, yeah, maybe I will. Who knows? But I never heard of this guy. And I was super excited to find out he's gay, of course. But he basically, okay, his story is kind of crazy. So he works for a magazine. It's like either in the late 90s or the early 2000s. I think the story starts in the 90s and then ends in the early 2000s. But he works for this magazine during the time of online pharmacies, and he is supposed to write a story about how easy it is to get sketchy pills from online pharmacies. So he orders them, and they come in the mail, and his boss is like, you got rid of the pills though, right? Like, you ordered them to prove that it worked, and then you got rid of the pills because, you know, sketchy pills. We just don't need any of that. He's like, yeah, I got rid of them. He didn't. He took them, and it was, again, one of those warm blanket hallelujah moment type of situations. And he was like, well, it's so easy just to buy pills from the internet at that time in history. Like, they had sketchy doctors that would be like, oh, you have pain, here, have 1,000,000 Vicodin or whatever, or you have anxiety, here's like 1,000 Xanax. It's sketchy time in history. And he does what any person with an addiction does and just keeps on finding different ways to get pills. Eventually, like the online pharmacy thing, the government or something realizes it's sketchy, and then he has to find pills elsewhere. But it's, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. But his story is like super intense. And also, since he's a writer for a magazine, when he writes the book, he's an excellent storyteller. So it's another page turner. And the cool thing about this book is like, okay, it's his story of his addiction. And then he's also interviewing like a number of other people that have pill addictions, just to like demonstrate different ways that it can play out in people's lives. And then he also is going into the history of pill mills and the legal repercussions that came later with legitimate doctors that had actual patients with chronic pain. And then the doctors would get arrested for drug trafficking or murder when patients would either misuse the medication or, or the drug trafficking is just like if the DEA thought that the doctor was prescribing too much. But in reality, it's like some people do have horrifying chronic pain and need buttloads of pills. So he tells all that history. It's like quite good journalism, and he explains how now we're at this point with doctors where they're afraid to prescribe to people because of how crazy it was in the past with like the online pharmacies and the pill mills, and then all of the legal repercussions that came later. And it's a really engaging book because the chapters switch around. Like it'll be a chapter about history, it'll be a chapter about him, it'll be a chapter about someone that he's interviewing. And there's not a lot of books that I've found about pill addiction or painkiller addiction. Like we had Stash a few months back that I reviewed, but I think this is one of the ones that a lot of people in every addiction suffer in silence, but I think especially painkiller addiction or like pill addiction, people suffer in silence because there's this idea that like, okay, those of us out on the streets with the brown paper bag and the crack pipe, like those are addicts and those are drugs, right? But, if you get it from a doctor, if it's a prescription, if it's a pill, if it's from a pharmacy, then that's safe and that's normal. And that's something that like people who live in houses and have insurance and doctors can do. And then those people are just like hidden behind a veil with their addiction in their homes, not talking about it and suffering in silence and just trying to hope nobody finds out or something. And from working on the ambulance, I definitely saw people fiending and like trying to get medications from us or people misusing their medications. There's a lot of overdoses and stuff like that. So, it's like obviously a problem, and I'm extra concerned about it because I know that there's like a lot of people suffering in silence addicted to pills on their own. So I was super stoked to find this book because I'm like, oh, cool. Someone who is displaying the history of all of it, how we got this way, his personal struggles and the struggles of a number of other people that he interviews. So I think it's cool to have this book on, it's just like super comprehensive about painkiller addiction. And he's an excellent writer, so it's like really engaging. And he's gay. We love that. So I would recommend Pillhead, The Secret Life of a Painkiller Addict by Joshua Lyon. And then last on my list, it's a book called Attachment Theory, A Guide to Strengthening the Relationships in Your Life by Tice Gibson. And I'm including this one not because it specifically has to do with addiction, but because you guessed it, everything's connected. And there was a time in our support group when we went over ACEs, which are Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's a test that you can take and see like, basically how much fucked up shit happened in your childhood. And you get a number from that. And then the number corresponds with your risk factor for developing an addiction. But it also corresponds with risk factors that are like way more highly increased for like heart attacks and strokes and diabetes and all sorts of health problems. So that is super interesting. And tied to the adverse childhood experiences is attachment theory, which is my current obsession right now. So you know how we get with autistic obsession. It is like an 11 out of 10. It's all I can think about. So basically, attachment theory is the concept that when our parents are well attuned to us as children, when they recognize our emotions, they pick us up when we're crying. They're like, oh, you're sad, blah, blah, blah. If we have like consistent emotional and physical attunement with our parents when we're children, that person will become securely attached. And then throughout their lives, they have healthy, securely attached relationships, friendships, romantic relationships with other people. But if our parents don't hit the nail on the head and maybe we have inconsistent attachment as children, or we have straight up abandonment, then those children will develop insecure attachment. And within that, there's avoidant attachment and anxious attachment. And then a combination of the two is disorganized attachment. I have anxious attachment. I've been working on it with a therapist for a while, which sparked my interest in it because, so basically, anxious attachment will be a person who has this core wound of a fear of abandonment, and that person is just horrified and scared and constantly preparing for someone to abandon them, so they overcompensate by becoming like a people pleaser and squelching their own needs and just doing whatever they think other people want them to do in order to try to secure those relationships and prevent themselves from being abandoned. But unfortunately, it's counterintuitive because the more you act like that, the more you drive away people because they see it as red flag behavior. And then avoidant attachment is people whose parents were just sort of like absent, either emotionally or physically. And those people learn that they can only rely on themselves and that making a connection with someone means that they cannot depend on them. So they think that they can only depend on themselves. So then when someone starts to be attracted to them or come into their lives, they learn to repel them. And the ironic thing about all of this is anxious people are drawn to avoidant people and avoidant people are drawn to anxious people. And then they make this sort of like toxic, unfulfilling, difficult couplings. And I've been there many times. And it's really interesting being 37 years old and finally learning this about myself and working to heal it. And then just looking back on my life and being like, oh my God, having the veil lifted from over my eyes and just seeing the pattern of the past and being like, wow, it was like that for so long and I had no idea. And the exciting thing about it, speaking of neuroplasticity, is that we can heal and we can repair our attachment issues and then we can have healthier relationships in the future. And when healthier relationships exist in our lives, it's going to bring our level of contentment up in general, brings the level of stress down. And if we're more content and less stressed, we're going to be less likely to try to bury our sorrows or our difficult emotions in a drug or a drink, right? So that's how I think all of this is connected. Also, there is interesting neurochemical, neurobiological stuff that happens where like, gosh, I'll just refer to the podcast episode about it later, but where it's like certain brain chemicals are not working right because of our attachment issues. And then kind of the only thing that's working is dopamine. And since we're not getting all these other normal happy brain chemicals, I believe it's like vasopressin and GABA and oxytocin. Since we're not getting enough of those because of the attachment trauma and how our neural connections formed when we were kids, the only thing that works is dopamine. And what do addictive substances give us? You got it. Shit tons of dopamine. So it's like we're sitting here mashing the dopamine button like crazy. And it's largely connected to the misattunement of our parents to us when we were kids that formed our insecure attachment. And the reason I'm choosing this book to recommend to y'all is because it is an excellent beginner book on this. It's just, what is attachment theory? You take a little quiz, what is my attachment style? You can also take quizzes like, what is my partner's attachment style? And it helps you understand each other better. And it gives you like a starting point, like a jumping off point to understand yourself, understand that attachment exists and ways that you can use different, she has like cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, meditation techniques, like all sorts of stuff to be able to begin to heal the attachment issues. And I personally think it's great to do this stuff with a therapist. Obviously, like books are awesome. I love them. And I love like working on this stuff on my own, but also being able to have a trained mental health professional to walk you through it is just, it's going to help you every step of the way. And being able to like ask questions. Unfortunately, you can't ask a book a question. I wish you could, but ask your therapist questions while you're working through attachment stuff. But yeah, I am like healing, but I'm not healed, duh. And I'm just so excited. Like every bit of information I get on attachment, I'm like, oh yes, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. Because watching myself heal, seeing my patterns shift and just feeling better is outstanding. I cannot recommend it enough. So in that same vein, I have 3 single episodes of podcasts to go with the attachment theory. And I know I said in the last episode that I was like sick of listening to podcasts, and that is true. So I haven't gone out there to like verify that any of these podcasts, well, one of them I love. I haven't gone out there in the world to like just completely go spelunking and searching for brand new podcasts in general, especially like sobriety ones. I'm a little bit burned out at the moment. I'm still just listening to sad music in my car mostly, but the power of my autistic obsession currently with attachment issues and talking about them all the time to everyone has led to people sending me individual episodes of podcasts concerning the topic of attachment. So thank you to my friends for doing that, because I'm obsessed and I need to feed my obsession. So the first one on the list is Mahon McCann's podcast, episode number 63 with Attachment Adam, How to Fix Your Attachment Issues. And at first I was like, oh my God, like more white men fucking talking about themselves. But what is also annoying is that this guy, Attachment Adam, has absolutely no queer literacy. He's like, men and women, and men are like this and women are like this. And I'm like, oh my God. But the thing about it is he started with anxious attachment, he healed it, and now he's super passionate and obsessed with telling people all about attachment issues. And he is the one who goes into the like neurobiological reasoning why people with addictions are mashing the dopamine button. He's the one talking about like vasopressin bonding and oxytocin and how all of that happens when we have healthy attachment in childhood, how it doesn't happen when we don't. And he explains it in the most clear, succinct, concrete, easy to digest way that I've ever heard. And he also provides advice on extremely clear ways to rebuild your attachment bonds to be secure. And that's why I love him. Brother needs to learn that gay people exist and people with gender diversity exist, because the man-woman thing, I'm just like, oh my God. I'm so immersed in queer culture that I cannot even believe straight people exist like this sometimes. Bless his heart. But I'm honestly obsessed with this Adam Lane Smith guy. Now I'm watching a bunch of his YouTube videos and I just like gloss over the straight people stuff because the content is like, it is so clear and he's so direct, and he's like, here's why you have this problem. Here is how you solve this problem. And I'm like, thank you for being so clear and direct. And then the second one on here is DharmaPunxNYC, episode 454, Safe Enough to Love, A Journey from Insecure to Secure Attachment. And I am obsessed with this guy, Josh Corda, who does DharmaPunx. He is like a punk elder who became a Buddhist pastor who gives these Dharma talks once a week. But he ties in, I actually reviewed his entire podcast a few months ago, and I would recommend every single episode because he is an angel. But so he ties in evolutionary neurobiology to how late stage capitalism is affecting our lives, and then ties that all in. And then he's like, and 3,000 years ago, the Buddha said this. And it's just like, man, the human condition really hasn't changed that much over thousands of years. It's just like the external conditions around us are just making it more insufferable. But this is another great episode from him. And the cool thing about his podcast is it's also super practical, because the second half is often a guided meditation. Not often, it's always a guided meditation. So he's like, here's the evolutionary neurobiological reason why we are the way we are. Here's the sociocultural reason why we are the way we are. Here's what the smart thing the Buddha said about it 1,000,000 years ago. And like, now let's learn how to do a meditation together. And the meditations are just like focused on learning healthy coping skills to be able to deal with whatever issue he's talking about in that episode. And this one is learning secure attachment, which I'm obsessed with. So I would recommend the DharmaPunxNYC podcast. And then the last one on my list, I had a friend send me, and it's called Two Dudes Talkin' Therapy, Healing Anxious Attachment. And that episode came out June 10th. And then 2 episodes before that was one called Healing Avoidant Attachment. And after I listened to this one, I was like, oh my God. I texted her, my friend that sent it to me, and I was like, that was literally 1 hour of just being called out by these dudes. I'm like, are they inside of my brain? Like, how do they know this is what I am going through? And they kind of give some like tough love advice how to deal with the anxious attachment, facing and surviving your guilt, like sitting in your guilt. And I was like, ew, but I don't want to do that. But it's often the difficult, hard things and the uncomfortable things that are going to propel us into growth. So I really appreciated this podcast for that. I honestly, like, once I get in the mood to start listening to podcasts again, might check out this entire podcast, because it was just two dudes talking therapy. It was like really relaxed. It wasn't super clinical. I mean, they both have doctor in front of their names, so, you know, they got some cred or whatever. But it was just, yeah, the vibe of the whole podcast was just... It was just relaxed. It was approachable, easy to understand, like a little too relatable, if you want my honest opinion. Sometimes you get called out, you know? Sometimes it's like, why are these dudes just calling me out for an hour? But it kind of feels good, because then I'm like, oh, if they're up in here, like, being able to call me out directly, it just means that I'm not the only one that feels like this, and a lot of people are going through the same thing. The statistics say that 60% of people have secure attachment. I don't know where they are because I've never met them, but that does leave 40% the rest of us with insecure attachment, and that's kind of a huge portion of the population that needs healing. So perhaps it's you. Perhaps you want to check out attachment theory and see where you fall. If it's insecure, secure, anxious, avoidant, whatever. And just know you can heal your own brain. You put one foot in front of the other, you make the next right decision, you do the next right thing, and you're going to see progress, you're going to see healing, and keep focusing on doing the next right thing, and your life is going to get better. But yeah, that's all I've got for y'all today. Somehow I just sat here and babbled on and on again for fucking half an hour. So if you're still listening, thank you. If you're struggling today, I fucking love you. You're a badass motherfucker for being alive and surviving. You're doing a great job. Fucking do the next right thing, and I'll see you on the other side. I love you. May you be happy and free, dear listener.
Recovery Demystified is produced and edited by me, Early Brunner. Stevie Petet made our logo. Our social media manager is Kaylee Bausch. Logan Bragg wrote our beautiful theme music. We are entirely supported by donations as a 501c3 nonprofit. Your tax-deductible donations can be made to our Venmo or to our PayPal at Recovery Demystified. May you be happy and free, dear listener.